Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to well, it's not really Hobby Nightmares. We're going into gatekeeping today, which I think is a really, really interesting part of the hobby that I actually covered about 6 months ago. As I said in the last video that I made, I would like to look at these as like a 6 monthly argument pieces that we're going to be putting together on the channel. Because these things are very, very, very complicated. And that's why I want to cover them multiple times. Because my opinion might change. And the world might change. The hobby might change. Anything might change in that period of time. Before we get started, please do me a solid and go look at Composite Games if you want to support the channel in other ways apart from giving me money on Patreon or doing your you're doing your bit by becoming a member of the channel. If you need some models, go to Composite Games. The link is down below. And use the promo code Northern Exile to get an extra 5% off of your order at checkout. They ordered you 20% off most of their models, so you could end up with 25% off your next big hobby purchase. I booked in to talk to US people all weekend, so apologies, that's going to be around a week late when I've got some news for you on that one. But I can't dictate when stores move and when stores do certain things when they're really busy. So I should have news this weekend. I'm booked to speak to people around this weekend. So moving on, if you like what I do on the channel, please subscribe to the channel, and like the video. It really does help out the channel in the algorithm metrics, things like that. And without further ado, let's get cracking with some discussions on gatekeeping. So, first of all, this video is going to be split up into 4 parts, okay? 4 parts of me. Generally, in part 1, I'm going to define the argument of what gatekeeping is. It's going to be a very raw video where I basically give my opinions on certain things. But what I have asked over the past couple of days is that my community gets in touch with me on what they think gatekeeping is and if they think it is important or not. And again, I've had other YouTubers chime in on this as well, 2 of which I've asked to remain unnamed, which is fine. But we have a very interesting video. So part 1 is defining the argument. Part 2, I'll be defining the fears, which is where my community is going to come in and tell you about what kind of things they don't want to see in the hobby, which is a form of gatekeeping, right? And why it's important. Part 3, we'll be discussing the ugly side of gatekeeping. I think you know what's coming there. And in part 4, we'll be going over my own opinion, where I'm going to tie all that together and give you my own opinion, and if it's changed or not over the past 6 months from my last gatekeeping video. So, did you guys know that Yorkshire tea actually make green tea? Yeah. I'm on a health kick right now, and I can't drink normal tea without sugar. So, you know, I now have to have green tea. But it's really nice. I'll give them that. They've done a really good job. Anyway, moving on. Get my tea fetish out the way. Defining the argument. So, a lot of folks, including large YouTubers, people like Outer Circle, I've talked about this before, say that gatekeeping is essential to keeping the soul of a hobby intact. Okay? What do I mean by that? I mean that a hobby is a place built by people. Games Workshop may have started the ball rolling with Warhammer. They may have started the ball rolling with Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar and Fantasy Battles and all these Mordheim, all these other things. But it's the fans who take it on. And it's the fans who build it into what it is. Which is why it was such a controversy when, you know, we started seeing YouTube channels being nuked all over the place for using Games Workshop's IP, right? It's their right to do that, of course. But it is definitely shooting yourself in the foot when you can't really make content that is anywhere near as good as things like text-to-speech device, you know? And yes, I will keep going on about it because I'm still salty. They intend people like this. Gatekeeping is essential for these people because the regulation of those entering is needed, in their opinion, to ensure the hobby remains the same one they got themselves into, right? So, say you enter into Warhammer 40,000 because you love the grim darkness of the far future, right? You absolutely love that part of the setting. You love watching it, you love getting on with it, you just absolutely adore it, right? And over time, with more people coming into the hobby, it becoming more mainstream, it starts to lose that edge. It starts to lose that grim darkness until it's basically a Saturday morning cartoon. That would be a bad thing for you, okay? And in your opinion, and I kind of agree, gatekeeping is a very good way of making sure that your hobby is held to specific standards, and it isn't thrown away by everything else, you know? Essentially. Some people can see this as grown men rending their garments because others are playing with their toys in the wrong way, okay? And sometimes they're correct. But I actually think there are a minority of idiots in the hobby who push this narrative with their own behaviour. And we'll get into those later. They do exist. I'm telling you now, they exist. There are people in our hobby who give the people who talk down to our hobby every bit of ammunition they need to take us down. And say gatekeeping shouldn't happen at all. Okay? Essentially, gatekeeping, when it works, simply is supposed to ensure that those entering into the hobby are doing so in good faith, and not to change the hobby to suit them, and thereby ruining it for those who built the space to begin with. Right? I'm going to circle back to this later, because I believe it's essential, and I will repeat it, because I think this is the definition of what gatekeeping is when it works. Essentially, gatekeeping, when it works, simply is supposed to ensure that those entering into a hobby are doing so in good faith, and not to change the hobby to suit them, and thereby ruining it for those who built the space to begin with. Very simple. It's like, that is gatekeeping's mission statement right there. Right? That's what we're looking at in terms of gatekeeping. That is the positive side of gatekeeping for me. There are very ugly sides that we'll get into a bit later on. But what are the fears of the community? What are the fears of the Warhammer community looking at other players coming into their games and coming into their spaces? Right? And I think it's very rich sometimes that some people on the left, you know, I would say some people on the right as well, but mostly on the left from what I've seen, right? When they come into a hobby like Warhammer 40,000, they start to change it for their own ends. They start to change it because of what they want to see in the hobby. But if somebody came into one of their safe spaces, quote unquote, and started to do that, you can imagine the shitstorm that would follow, okay? These are the things I want to avoid when we're coming into gatekeeping. That's why I think gatekeeping in its own way is kind of essential. But I'll get into that when I have my own opinion a bit later on. But number one, let's discuss some of the fears that people have of gatekeeping. So I had an amazing piece of essay writing given to me by a subscriber called Milkmonger. I'd like to congratulate you on, one, your writing style. I think it's fantastic. And if you're not going to university, you definitely should do. Your reasoning and your arguments is also extremely well put together, so very well done. If I was marking this, you'd be getting a good mark, essentially, and I do that for a living, so take that as a feather in your cap, if you will. I have boiled down his arguments into the two bits I really identified with, and I thought would really be extremely good for going into the video. Essentially, what Milkmonger has done is he's canvassed his own experiences with his own friends, with his own people that he knows, and things like that, to come up with things that people from outside of the hobby, or people entering into the hobby who want to change it, find problematic about Warhammer 40,000. Yeah, we're going there. So yeah, Milkmonger says, armchair activism rarely stops when it gets what it wants. That is another really cool line that I wanted to share. Armchair activism rarely stops when it gets what it wants. Okay? Now notice Milkmonger doesn't use political languages here. He doesn't use left or right or woke or whatever. No. He just says armchair activism rarely stops when it gets what it wants. Okay? This is an apolitical point. And he's right. This again, don't think that this video is all one thing, because we're exploring why. In this part of the video, we're exploring why gatekeeping is necessarily needed, right? Okay. So, there's always something else to scream about. Here is a laundry list of problematic 40k qualities that I have come across from my friends off the top of my head. Okay. By the way, Milkmonger doesn't subscribe to any of these. These are things that he's come across in his own dealings in the hobby. Okay. So, no female space marines. is deemed problematic by people entering the hobby. No female phenotype orcs. God, that's stuff in nightmares. Slanesh is insulting to trans people. I've heard that one before. The Imperium is racist, religious, and contains problematic imagery of European conquest. I think we know what they're talking about. Too many Primarchs are white men. Krieg are basically far-right people, even though they're World War I Germans. Ultramarines are racist because racists love Rome. No trans representation in the model line. Not enough diversity in the Imperial Guard. Racist diversity in Imperial Guard. Talon are problematic, in quotes. Nurgle is fatphobic. Tzeentch is a caricature of autism and neurodivergence. Do you know what? I'm just gonna pick this up, right? I'm in the midst of creating a new setting. You will be shocked to realise. You know, I do this on a weekly basis, apparently. One of the races in that setting is bioengineered to have autism. Okay? Because they needed amazing mechanics and people who could act like, essentially, savants in terms of using technology, right? And so they are very neurodivergent, and they have autism, but they are designed to be that way. And only over like 50,000 years of interbreeding with other people have they lost that, the debilitating autism that they then had. But as a race, they're still very, very, very shy and awkward in social situations, and they're still very good at using machines and things like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's a really good way of having representation. I think what's being said here is that Tzeentch is an evil creature, an evil god, and so you're using autism and neurodivergence to do, certain things. I've never gotten that from Tzeentch. But I don't believe people will blanket say you're not supposed to use an autism or anything like that, or any mental illness in your writing. That's bullshit. Absolute bullshit, right? I have several friends who have severe autism. Shock horror, I'm a Warhammer player. And I ran this by them even when I was writing it, and they were like, yeah, this is brilliant. If I saw this in an RPG book, I'd be like, I'm playing one of these dudes, because I don't even need to play a character. I can just be myself, It's great. All right, anyway, moving on. Not enough queer Space Marine relationships. There are no Space Marine relationships. What are you on about? Necrons are racist because Egypt. Tau are racist because Japan. Alright, I kind of see that one, but I'm not going to get into it. Orcs are racist because old Mongolian hat art. Eldar aren't racially diverse and propagate problematic Tolkien notions of white supremacy through the depiction of perfect beings. Basically because they're all white. At no point does Khorne canonically suck his own... Okay, I'm not gonna go into that. There are innumerable ways 40k can be broken down and complained about by the earnestly mentally ill. It can have every unique aspect picked at until nothing of the original universe remains, making it a safe play space for people who never liked it to begin with. Okay? So a lot of that seems very funny, but the point he's trying to make here is very, very important. Okay? Right? It makes it a safe space for people who never liked it to begin with. Okay? It makes it a amalgamous grey sludge where everything's the same and nothing's different. Right? To wrap this up, he says, I believe there are legitimate reasons why people want to gatekeep the hobby they love. Everybody has their own problems, and escapism is a good way to rejuvenate the mental batteries. It's why people spend time with friends, play games, create art, tell stories. These activities help to keep people going emotionally and mentally. For Warhammer 40,000 isn't an idealistic universe to live in, but it's a universe some people find fun and wish to express their ideas in. So, when someone trots along, sneers at the universe, and passively accuses its enjoyers of being subliminally racist, bigoted, and hateful, it's very easy to come to the conclusion that maybe, just maybe, some people shouldn't be partaking in this universe. Sorry for the long write-up. Okay, this is him talking about it. But I'm going to repeat that last paragraph. Because it was so well written. Okay? So when someone trots along, sneers at the universe, and passively accuses its enjoyers as being subliminally racist, bigoted, and hateful, it's very easy to come to the conclusion that maybe, just maybe, some people shouldn't be partaking in this universe. And by some people, I'm assuming he means those people who are sneering at the hobby, right? Okay, brilliant stuff by Milkmonger there. I want to move on to somebody called Coffeeholic, who also made some very salient points in a letter that he inundated me with on the Discord. So, hey, hello Northern, replying to your comment on gatekeeping. I cannot begin to understand the need nor want for gatekeeping, as it is not only detrimental to the hobby in which the person is gatekeeping for, but also for the person. I do, however, have a theory. So we have a dissenting opinion here, somebody on the opposite side of the fence to Milkmonger. Okay, it seems, but let's see if he sticks to that line. He says, I believe gatekeeping came about when nerds grew up bitter from the way they were treated in their high school ages, junior high, and so on, that they see that the types of people who use the ridicule and to degrade them for their hobbies and interests they had, okay? This has brought a false call to arms to people out of what is termed their hobbies, essentially committing the same sins that were perpetrated against them. I do not have a story that happened to me personally, but one that happened to a member of my family. My middle sister wanted to start Dungeons & Dragons. She knew I played it and have DM'd on a few occasions. I'm not the best, but what can I say? I love world building and storytelling. Good for you, man. I started to teach her 5th edition. Good, right? And people will have a go at me for saying this, but 5th edition is one of my favourite editions of Dungeons & Dragons. Simply because it's so easy to get more people into the hobby. I can take this, my sister's got into it, a bunch of my friends have got into it, when at first they looked at like Pathfinder and 3.5, which I really love, but they were just so hard to get into for somebody who wasn't even sure that he wanted to do it yet. 5th edition takes you by the hand and says, come on, let's go on an adventure together, and let's see where it goes, right? And I really like that. I know there's downsides to it, but, She started picking it up after a few one-shots and continuing small-time adventures to get her to understand the base mechanics and character building. She then took off the training wheels and did a campaign with her friends, whereupon this story takes a dark turn. She did not realise it, but one of her friends was a power gamer and had been arguing with the DM about the class restrictions put in place. They wanted to create a monk, I don't know the type, just what she told me, and was told no given how powerful they are in the current meta. It was then the PG turned their attention to the group and started berating and lambasting them, my sister obviously included, as not being proper players, quote unquote. They ridiculed their characters, my sisters in particular, because they weren't the optimal builds that are known through the game. My sister was playing a moon elf, a high elf with fluff, sorceress that can mostly do support magic. This is what she likes doing rather than outright DPS, which is damage per second if people don't know what that means. Given this was her main focus through the practice rounds with me, she was fairly good at it. Nevertheless, this person took to destroying the mood with their rampage of nerdy purity. Session 0 was rescheduled. The person and the DM apologised. Without the person and the DM apologised. In closing, gatekeeping doesn't just destroy the hobby, but destroys people. My sister worked hard with that character and now has a hard time wanting to play D&D at all. Even after I offered to run her through a campaign where I know no PGs or purists reside. Okay, so here we're seeing the other side of that argument, right? What his sister has come across here is somebody who I'm going to elaborate as being one of the pieces of scum that is part of every single geekdom, hobby fandom sort of a thing. By the way, if you're a power gamer, that's not what I mean. I don't mean you. It's a legitimate way to play in a game, right? I would say it's even a legitimate way to play Dungeons and Dragons, okay? Power gaming. It's just not a legitimate way to treat 90% of Dungeons and Dragons tables, right? If somebody's playing Dungeons and Dragons, power gaming on 90% of those tables will ruin the game for everybody else at the table. You know? But it doesn't mean it's the wrong way to play D&D. It's not. It's not. I have come across people who play D&D, and they're very power gamey, and they're very purist in the way that they look at their characters. And they warn you when you're entering the table, hey man, this is like a quite full on, you know what I mean? Like we go for it in terms of the combat. You know, we're used to playing Pathfinder or whatever, and it gets quite clunky. So it does have a place, okay? And I don't mean you when I'm saying this. His message is all wrong here, right? The way he approaches this, the rest of the table here, is gatekeeping in its worst form. It's saying you all don't deserve to be here because you don't play with these toys in exactly the same way that I play them. That I play them, right? I even had it on the other video where people were getting butthurt with the fact that I said that guy who's power gaming shouldn't be on that table. He should just go and find another table to play on, right? People saying, well, he should be able to play however he wants. No, I'm sorry. Like, it's not his table. It's not his game, right? It's the DM who decides what kind of game is going to be played. And if you keep ruining it with characters that are designed to break his narrative, even if you're underplaying them, right? As soon as everyone finds out that you're underplaying, it just ruins the immersion for everybody else. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Go and find people. 90% of any hobby like this is finding other people who want to play the game in the same way you do and sticking with those people. And then going to, and maybe broadening your horizons later on and saying, hey, well, maybe I want to try a non-grindy game for once. Maybe I don't want a power game for once. Maybe I want to examine that part of the hobby. And do you know what? If you're not a dick about it, quite a lot of people who don't do power gaming will eventually go, do you know what? I want to create a really power gamey character. I'm going to go find some of those guys and play with them. That's how the hobby grows, right? This is the worst kind of gatekeeping. It's plugging your ears, whinging like a baby, and saying, you're not playing the game in the same way that I play it, so you're playing it wrong. You're a dick, and you shouldn't be in this hobby. There you go. Said it, right? So, I'm really glad that we got two opposite sides of the coin there. And I agree with both. Right? Because just like things in life, I know you guys, well, not you guys, but I know people on the internet want to be polarizing. They want everything to be black and white. Life doesn't work that way. Grow the fuck up. Right? That's just it. Life doesn't go that way. It's a series of grey decisions and grey situations. And this gatekeeping is definitely one of them. Okay. So, Angry Chainax is back, folks. This time with an opinion on gatekeeping. Hey Exile, sorry for the message spam lately, but I had some insights on gatekeeping that I wanted to share. I agree that there needs to be some form of self-policing in the hobby in order to correct or deter those whose behaviour is inappropriate. But I have two forms of gatekeeping that I would like to caution people against. I have dealt with both of these multiple times during my 13 years or so in the hobby. The first form I want to address is attempting to force people to hobby the exact same way you do. We've just covered that. My experience with this was the Dark Angel acquaintance who constantly tried to steer me away from playing Chaos Space Marines to a Loyalist chapter. I repeatedly told him I preferred the traitors in the lore and I liked their aesthetic. He just didn't get it. And his comeback was little more than, but Space Marines. It was just annoying constantly hearing about how I had made the wrong choice, and I feel like I was less, and he felt like I was a less invested person, and I might have dropped the hobby if I was. The second form is unsolicited advice. Oh yeah, there's a few lady YouTubers and Warhammer gamers who can give you some stories on this. I'm sure. I understand that people want to be helpful. But don't approach someone at your local shop and start telling them all the things they are doing wrong. I repeatedly had this happen to me during 8th edition. My World Eaters list was usually Kharn, several Berserker squads, and a Spartan assault tank. I loved running that behemoth up the table and watching a blood-crazed horde of bloody world eaters spill out. Obviously, it wasn't ultra-competitive, but it felt like something the world eaters would definitely do. Yeah, definitely. I repeatedly had an employee come up to me during games and tell me I should ditch the Spartan and use rhinos instead because it was more competitive. I hope you told him to fuck off, dude. Like, yeah, world eaters definitely think about tactics. That's what they're built on. The kind of ultramarines, you know what I mean? Now, fuck off. Anyway, I always told him that my warband was the remains of an armoured company, and my Chaos Lord Karnak the Scorned, brilliant name, had maintained the Spartan as his command vehicle since the Horus Heresy. This explanation was clearly ridiculous to the employee, and he kept droning on about points and objectives, blah blah blah. If I asked the person for advice, that would be one thing. However, I did not want his advice and would rather get on with enjoying my game without someone telling me how to play my army. Not everything has to be ultra-competitive and efficient. I have also had one person at my local store come up to the table while me and a friend are playing a game. He looked at my friend's beautifully painted Death Guard, and to my friend's credit, he is extremely talented, and talks to him about painting techniques. He then looks at my army, which I can confidently say is painted to a decent tabletop standard, if not a bit better. I am no artist or competition painter, but I have improved significantly since I first started. Angry Chainax, you sound like me, man. The Astral Blades are definitely like that. I noticed as he was looking at my World Eaters that he arched one eyebrow. I thought, hell, here we go. He proceeded to give me tons of painting advice. I was annoyed, but I stayed calm and polite. I know there are many areas where I can improve, but once again, I did not ask for your advice. I was there to enjoy my game. It can be discouraging to people when people always take one look at your stuff and immediately tell you how you could have made it better. Always wait for someone to ask for advice before you jump in. Anyway, sorry for my long rant and thanks for listening. Okay, so that is a really cool way of looking at certain behaviours that are in the hobby. Yes, we do have a lot of people who are trying to... Not all gatekeeping comes from a bad place. Sometimes people are just used to giving critiques and help, quote-unquote, to other people who are in the hobby. And that isn't always a bad thing. Where you have to draw the line is when you start, shall we say, giving opinions that aren't expressly asked for, okay? Again, you can look at this as a form of gatekeeping, or you can't. It's you can go either way with it, as far as I'm concerned. I do believe gatekeeping is essential to keeping the hobby as it's supposed to be, okay? But I do believe there are people within the hobby who go out of their way to say, hey, if you're not doing it in exactly the same way that I am, to the standard that I am, then you don't deserve to be here. Fuck those people. They give everybody else a bad name, and they shouldn't be in the hobby themselves. Okay? And let me tell you this. There are a lot of people working for Games Workshop's retail side of the business who are very much like that. I've discussed a few on the channel. So, JP, this is a shorter one. On the subject of gatekeeping, it is more often than not a good thing. I was gatekept from a local Horus Heresy group until my painting improved and I read at least three of the novels. It was a challenge to get better and reach a goal, and by the time I finished the books, I had a new appreciation for just how cool the Blood Angels actually are. That kind of gatekeeping is very positive. It simply is preserving the things that make you enjoy your expensive hobby. Of course, gatekeeping someone for reasons they can't control, race, sex, etc., isn't cool. But I do think that behaviour is a valid reason to gatekeep someone, and asking them to meet certain hobby standards and effort investment is so much better than open borders hobby. Okay, so literally this has flowed beautifully, right? So we've gone from what I've just said there to JP coming in with another slant on what I've just said, okay? So I just said that, look, people like that shouldn't be in the hobby. And JP has come in with a little different bit of a slant on it, but going, okay, well, you can't say that because you've just said the entire rest of the video that this is a grey area, right? So you can't say these people shouldn't be in the hobby. So what JP has done is said, well, maybe some of them shouldn't, but not everybody who does things like this are doing it as bad actors, or doing it out of bad faith, right? So JP was somebody who was gatekept from entering into Horus Heresy. He was told to go and read 3 novels, and he was probably given, you know, like, hey, these are if you were like Blood Angels, these are the 3 novels you want to read, my man. You'll love it, and come back to us, right, and play some games. Okay. They also want your painting to improve. Okay, improving your painting is a bit of a dick move. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Saying like your painting isn't good enough to play in this Horus Heresy group is a bit of a dick move. From how you've said it here, because from what you've said here, they've literally said go away till your painting is improved. They've not given you any tips. They've not helped you out. They've not been inclusive at all. They've just told you to fuck off until your painting improves. That's a dick move, in my opinion. You know, that's not how you grow a hobby. And that, to me, is a bad form of gatekeeping. The way you make it a good form of gatekeeping is you say, hey, man, when you come to our tables, your models need to be painted to a standard like ours. But if you come along on these nights, one of us will be happy to sit down and paint your Blood Angels with you and teach you some things like painting Blood Angels and Horus Heresy models. That's the best. That's a good form of gatekeeping. You're not letting him play yet, but you're helping him get there. You're still gatekeeping him, but you're pulling him in, saying, hey, man, you're going to love this, but, like, let's get your skills up to where they need to be first so you can be a productive member of the community, right? The novels thing, brilliant. That's brilliant. I love that. The fact that they say, yeah, if you want to play with us, read these 3 novels so you know what your Legion's all about and you know what the Horus Heresy is all about. No problem with that. Absolutely no problem, you know? That you can do on your own time, dead easy. You know, you can do it on Audible. Doesn't cost, hardly cost you anything. You can just go and do it, fine. Okay, brilliant. And you can read quite passively. You all know how to read, I hope, right? But asking someone to just get good at painting before you join a group is a bit of a dick move, right? Either grow a pair of balls and teach that person how to paint and bring them into the hobby, or just shut your mouth. Don't be in the hobby, right? That's just not a nice thing to do, right? Don't do that. But JP's point is incredibly salient. It's a very, very good point, in that not everybody who does the power gamer thing, as we've just seen, is doing it from a place I've just seen Angry Chainax talk about, especially in this second paragraph, when that person was telling him how to paint his models. Not everybody's doing that from a place of bad faith, okay? Sometimes they're trying to bring you up to make the hobby better. And what I will say is, how the hell do we get better without people coming in and telling you, hey, you know, this could be better, this could do this could do that. Now, is it rude to give somebody advice when they haven't asked for it? Yes. Yes. Should you give somebody advice when they haven't asked for it? No. 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 You're an arsehole. Don't do that. Right? But I am the kind of person, and I've come across many people in the hobby when they're not that good at painting who will ask you to help them. Right? And you're still making sure that the standards of the hobby are kept up. You're still doing that by helping those people. But you can do it without being a rude arsehole. Okay? Raising one eyebrow at somebody's models and saying, you could have done this better, you could have done that better, you could have done this better, you could have done that better, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? Mate, one, piss off, I'm trying to play a game. Number one. Right? Number two, I haven't asked for your opinion, mainly because I'm playing a game of Warhammer 40,000 right now, and that's quite mentally intensive, right? If I want your advice, I'll come and find you after this, because I want to get better in the hobby. Put it this way, eventually somebody who doesn't want to get better in the hobby of Warhammer 40,000 will find their level, right? It's kind of like football. If you're playing the Premier League for a while and you're not very good, eventually you'll be sold to a team who's lower down the leagues. You'll find your level and you'll be able to operate at that level. Not everybody in Warhammer 40,000 is a golden demon painter, and that's completely fine. If you want to get your models, spray them silver and dip them in oil and say they're done, that's fine. I don't care. But eventually you will find your level, because people with, golden demon level painted armies probably won't want to play against you. So you will find yourself playing against, eventually, other people who share the same level of the hobby that you do. There's no problem having different levels of expertise in a hobby like Warhammer 40,000, which is why I say, wait for somebody to ask you for advice and then give them advice. In terms of Horus Heresy, it's a little bit different, right? I stick to my guns here. If they've just told you, JP, to go away until your painting is improved, they're arseholes, right? That's not a good thing to do to somebody. But if they say, hey man, your painting, even if they say it like this, man, your painting's not good enough, but I tell you what, I've got Blood Angels as well, come with me. Right, here are my blood angels, and here's how I painted them. Right, so if you want to do blood angels in this group, right, you need to paint them to a similar standard. So here's what I do. Blah, 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 blah. Right? If you're going to gatekeep that way, at least be constructive about it, is what I'm saying. Right? Try not to do it when somebody's playing a game. And, you know, if you're... And it's different from Angry Chain Axe's story. JP's story is different from Angry Chain Axe's story, before everyone shouts hypocrisy, because I've just said two different things for a similar situation. JP's trying to enter into a very select hobby, Horus Heresy, right? He's not playing a game at a table and having somebody spout their opinions at him that haven't been asked for. JP's gone in and said, hey, can I play Horus Heresy with you guys? And they've given him an answer. No, your painting isn't good enough, and you need to read these 3 novels, right? Again, half of that statement is great. The painting stuff, bit of a dick move if you then don't offer to help that person get better at the hobby, because that's how the hobby grows. That's how we get better, right? Anyway, moving on to our third part of the video, which is the ugly side of gatekeeping. Now, when I say ugly side, I have screenshots, and I have not. If you are on these screenshots, and your name is, you know, not blurred, you know, a lot of them have far too many names on here for me to blur them out. So, I'm sorry if you're on here, but it is what it is. It is what it is. I have had several people over the past couple of months, and I've held on to these for quite a while, send me pictures of things that they have been sent as female gamers in the space of Warhammer 40,000, and not all of them are pretty at all. So, now, a few of you may giggle at this, you know. I giggled with these people in particular when I was reading them. I was like, oh my god, this happens? And they were like, yes, it does. Hence me having the evidence. But imagine posting something about Warhammer, like I do, right? And getting responses like this, okay? Alright, so. Right? Now, as you can see, far too many names for me to blur out, because I would have been here all day, right? And if you're on here, you should just fucking grow up and not be that guy, you know? Some of these are quite funny, like, you know, you got a guy on the right-hand side, they're actually taking the piss out of neckbeards, which is, you know, quite funny. But anyway, it's not a good look for the hobby, okay? Liking somebody who is into Warhammer 40,000 and they're female doesn't make you a simp. I'm gonna take that away from you right now. Doesn't make you a simp. You're okay. You're alright, man. You're alright. If you just like the hobby and you like the fact that more people are getting involved in the hobby, you're good, man. That's great. That's great. Right? When you have somebody in the bottom right here who says, what seems to be the issue here? She looks like a regular hobby enjoyer instead of not using the hobby for attention. So I'm a bit confused. And he's right. Completely right. This is just somebody playing a game of Warhammer 40,000. And then somebody underneath says, ignorant simp. I mean, imagine every single thing you post being like this. You know, going somewhere else and it becomes like this. You know, we have all of this narrative underneath. Okay? Right? I'm sure we're seeing a theme beginning here. Right? People congratulating, saying this is really cool. I like those earrings. People being, you know, sexually frustrated and taking it out on somebody on the internet. And we have people who are having a go at people who like this for being simps. I don't know what to tell you, right? This is the ugly side of gatekeeping. This is keeping people out of the hobby that we like. Because they're not like us. What? Right? What? I mean, yeah. Are we doing this? Like, I mean, it's. I don't know, man. I don't know. So anyway, it does happen, is what I'm saying, and it's not as if we come into these parts of the hobby and we can expect a complete whitewash. We're not all angels, right? I just wanted to show that as a definite look. It does happen. It has happened, and I'm sorry, but again, I was going to blur these names out, but then I thought, no, you said this. You actually said this. It's in the public domain, right? I'm just calling you out for what you've said as a response, right? Do we really need this? Make undesirables feel unwelcome. Refuse to interact with obvious soy boys and women. Huh? I mean, like, I don't understand. And for anybody who knows me, if you know me, you know I'm somebody who doesn't fall on the left-hand side of the spectrum, of the political spectrum. You know that's not me, okay? I would define myself as a normal guy who wants the hobby to grow, okay? And I'm not going to read through every single one of the things I've just shown. You can pause the video and look through them yourselves, you know. But, you know, I don't want to give these people any more airtime than I need to. But as I said, if you don't like the fact that you were used in a video here, then why'd you say it in the first place? Because what you said is in the public domain. Everyone can see it. Okay? Just saying. Moving on. If this is what you have to deal with coming into the hobby, then maybe we need to look at what gatekeeping actually is. And that's why I made this video. Is because people tend to have a very, shall we say, warped opinion sometimes on what gatekeeping is. Right? Gatekeeping is not what we've just seen. Gatekeeping is not running somebody out of town simply because they're not like you, or simply because they're enjoying the hobby in a way that you wouldn't personally enjoy it yourself, right? That's not the way we gatekeep in terms of the hobby. Is gatekeeping important? Fuck yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I'd like to close the video with a little bit of a lengthy discussion on my own opinion. My own opinion is that there are two forms of gatekeeping in Warhammer in particular. Two forms. Number one, which you've seen a few times in this video. People like Outer Circle, who's exposed his opinions on this, and people entering into Horus Heresy, who wish to keep the actual functioning hobby the way it is, whilst remaining true to what people actually enjoy about it. Whilst not allowing outside politics and forces to warp and destroy their hobby. They are generally welcoming of all players/hobbyists until they prove themselves to be acting in bad faith. Even then, bad actors are usually given multiple polite, quiet warnings before being ostracized from any group. The hobby is for everyone, in capital letters, but the hobby is the hobby and will not change for the whims of the few. There is a reason we loved it in the first place. That is a good form of gatekeeping. You're keeping the hobby, the spirit of the hobby, exactly what it was from the moment we start, right? Exactly what it was. You love it. You absolutely love it, and you want to go over it, and you want people to enjoy it, okay? Then, and I wanted to do, part 3 was a bit shorter because I wanted to link it into this part. We have the second form of gatekeeping, which I would like to get rid of. Number 2. The second form of gatekeeping involves the general scum that attaches itself to the underside of any nerd-based hobby. People with heavy insecurities who seem to think their hobby is their space to pervert and do what they want with. They cherish the more edgy content, or sometimes are rather normal people who have an overly protective view of their hobby, quote-unquote. Anyone not fitting the mould, even visually, of what they define as a wargamer, they decry as perverters of their beloved hobby. Ironically, those criticising simps, quote-unquote, and in brackets I want to do an aside here, simps do exist, and yes, it is toxic, and makes it harder for guys, for other guys, because it breeds generally toxic women, but, ironically, most of those criticising simps are usually bearing deep insecurities about their lack of skills in maintaining positive relationships with the opposite sex. In general, don't be this guy. Okay? And that's what we've just seen in our previous evidence part of the video, right? We've seen that second part of gatekeeping, and we've seen it throughout this video too, right? But we've seen both sides of gatekeeping, because I believe, like in most things in life, there is a grey area. We definitely have, in my opinion, two forms of gatekeeping in our hobby, one of which we have to cherish and keep doing, alright? We have to keep making sure that people entering into the hobby are doing so in good faith because they love the hobby and they love it because they love it for what it is. Alright? And they aren't people who are going to come in and poison it for everybody else. We want to make sure that people coming into the hobby are given the tools to become better hobbyists. And if they don't want to become better hobbyists, then maybe they shouldn't be here, right? They will eventually find their level anyway. Okay? That's the kind of gatekeeping that I think is essential for making sure that people stick to the hobby and the hobby grows. Is that we hold everybody to a certain standard. Okay? And if you're not at that standard yet, right, all you need to do is ask, and we'll help you get to that standard. Okay? We don't want to be over-roaring. We don't want to be giving people opinions they haven't asked for, right? Those people will find their way eventually. Those people who are getting into the hobby will find their way eventually in the hobby. That's what gatekeeping is. That's what it should be, right? We are custodians of our own hobby, and we need to ensure that people do and have a reason to stick around. Okay? There are ways and means of going about it, of course. You can implement this part of gatekeeping in a wrong way, as we've seen before, in my opinion. You know, in half of the things that JP was told. Okay? There are ways to go about being a hobbyist in good faith and do it in a poor way. That leaves people generally... Most people aren't going to act like JP there. Most people are going to be like, well, fuck you then. Yeah, you know? And then we have the second part of gatekeeping, which is, shall we say, ignorant arse-hats who ruin it for everybody else and who give ammunition to people who think that we're all sex-frustrated neckbeards. Okay? The general scum that attaches itself to the underside of any nerd-based hobby is what they are. These are people who come in and the general bullies. They think that this hobby is a place for them to indulge in their edgy content and their hentai memes, you know, and shit like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you like hentai, nothing wrong with that. You can get into it all you want, but I'm sorry. A lot of the shit that I see sometimes is normally around people who act like this. Right? They have an overly protective view of their hobby. And anyone not fitting the mould, even visually, of what they define as a wargamer, they decry as perverters of their beloved hobby. Ironically, they need to look in the mirror. Because they are the perverters of our hobby. Those are my opinions on gatekeeping, guys. Again, thank you very, very, very much for watching. I love you all a long time. Have a wonderful weekend if you're off. I know I am. So I'm going to be taking a few days just to, you know, chill out, do my own thing. Anyway, love you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And please make sure to support Composite Games, who've been supporting the channel for a while now. If you want up to 25% off of your models, enter the promo code Northern Exile into your order at checkout to get an extra 5% off. 5% off an order you probably already got 20% off of. So, hopefully you guys have a good weekend. I love you a long time. Speak to you soon. Have a good one.